All right. You're listening to America's Voice right here, right now. My name is Michael Evans. I am your host this morning. We're in the second of four specific segments in which we analyze and take apart the mass media, the mainstream media, the ministry of propaganda, and we take their stories and we use them to expose what's really happening. You know why? Because the truth is, more often than not, what the media doesn't write in a story is more important than what they do actually write. And so we always look for articles and stories where we can give you, they want you to look at it straight on, right? Like you look at yourself in a mirror. But if you ask people who are around you, well, what do I look like? Their impression of you is vastly different than yours. You know why? Because they see you slightly from the side, or they see you on a 45-degree angle, or they see you from the rear. And you don't look to them like you look to you. Ever take a mirror and stand there where you've got 2 or 3 mirrors on an angle, and suddenly you see sides of yourself you've never seen before? Well, once in a while, it requires a little introspection and a little investigation on our part. What we should be doing as critical thinkers and observers and activists and patriots is we should be taking the media that's out there and exploring it, looking at it, reviewing it, finding its holes, weighing it, and then making and formulating an opinion that is unique and individual based on the information and the knowledge we've gathered. If you are accepting the talking points of the Republican or the Democrat or the Libertarian or the Constitution or the we don't know what we're talking about party, then quite honestly, you've been deleterious in your duty. That's how we got here, ladies and gentlemen, because you've been failing to do your duty. And I don't mean you personally. I'm not trying to make this an aggressive between me and you. I'm just trying to point out the fact that the nation is apathetic and asleep. And they don't give a darn. And their attitude is, well, somebody else will fix it. Hey, let me tell you something. There is nobody else. It's us. And we're the ones not only who have allowed it to get this bad, but we're the ones who are going to have to fix it. How do we know that it's actually this bad? Pretty easy to tell, actually. All you got to do is look at some of the evidence and the stories that are out there. This morning, we're going to talk about this exclusive article that's in Washington Times. And I guarantee you're going to hear more about this one because it's pretty eye-opening. The FBI has been blocked by the Department of Justice, Eric Holder's Department of Justice, of course, the FBI has been blocked from participating in a corruption probe that involves both Senators Harry Reid and Mike Lee. Now, they're two different issues, so let's not conflate it, and I don't want you to get confused. You should read this article yourself, and it's a pretty long one. But the point is this. Dirty Harry Reid, who has got to be the most corrupt, the most evil man currently operating within our government in the Senate, he is always and should permanently be under investigation because everything this guy does is dirty. Mike Lee has been accused by Utah prosecutors of doing some kind of a dirty real estate deal. Now, Mike Lee is one of the favorites of the Tea Party. He's one of these guys that's out there, and his name is usually used synonymously with people like Trey Gowdy, with Ted Cruz, and that group. Do I think these charges have merit? I don't know. And here's the problem. The federal government and the Department of Justice has refused to allow these corruption investigations to go forward using a federal grand jury. Now, why does that matter? Well, you don't know how law works unless you understand what federal grand juries do. But a federal grand jury has the power to say, we believe that you've presented some evidence to us. We believe that there's enough evidence here that says that you should be able to go forward with the subpoena we're going to give you, and you should be able to get all kinds of, financial records or whatever it is that you're looking for. Search warrants, the whole 9 yards. Now, In this case, the Department of Justice has refused to allow a grand jury to be held. Why? Well, for starters, because one of the people is Harry Reid. And that ought to tell you a lot. Harry is one of the, and you know, when people talk about Harry Reid, they say he's a lion of the Senate. He's a lion, all right. He's a lion every time his mouth opens. He is one of the dirtiest, filthiest, most corrupt senators we have. This is the guy who said, I have it on good advice or information that Mitt Romney didn't pay his taxes. And it's an unidentified third party. What kind of a man who's the head of the entire Senate, the most vaunted position that you can get in the United States government, except for maybe a Supreme Court judge or the President of the United States himself, throws stuff like that out there in the middle of a presidential election, knowing he's an absolute bald-faced liar? Who else but Harry Reid could block every bill that comes to the Senate from the House? Dirty Harry has so much dirt on him, you need a shovel just to find his skin. He's scum. The scum of the earth. And every American, it's too bad he's not up for election, because the people in the state of Nevada need to remove him with prejudice, label him dishonorably discharged from the service of this country, and put him in prison. Now, the problem is we can't get him in prison. You know why? Because Eric Holder and the Department of Justice won't let us. Mike Lee, he's a different story. We'll get to him in a minute. This is a probe that is being done by two prosecutors in Utah. One is a Republican, one's a Democrat. And they're working together. They have gotten accusations from an indicted businessman and a political donor who interviewed other witnesses, and they got a lot of evidence, including financial records and so forth and so on, congressional records, statements, photographs. And they say, with all the evidence that we have, we've got a lot of information here and a lot of reason to believe that we need to take this investigation further. This is the one on Harry Reid now. But the Justice Department's Public Integrity Section, boy, is that a misnomer and an oxymoron. They say, and they're the group who normally handles corruption, right? They say they've rejected the FBI's request to put together a federal grand jury and allow subpoena power so that they can determine whether the accusations are actually true and whether any federal crimes have been committed. Now, the truth is, when we talk about Mike Lee, let's tackle him for a moment. In this case, there's a little bit of conflict here because, you know, ordinarily Harry Reid and Mike Lee would never be used in the same sentence, right? Because Lee is the patriot, Tea Party boy, poster boy, and Reid is the big government liberal, whatever. So the complication here is the fact that Harry Reid worked to get Mike Lee's chief counsel, a guy by the name of David Barlow, confirmed as the U.S. attorney in Salt Lake City. Now, that's unusual because generally Harry Reid would do anything and everything to thwart any Republican from anything that he could in any way, shape, and form that he can muster. Not because it's good or bad for the country, just because he can't stand him and he's a partisan hack and an ideologue. But he allowed this Republican U.S. attorney, David Barlow, to be named to a key prosecutor position. And at the time, everybody went, huh? Harry Reid? You mean to tell me Harry's helping a Republican prosecutor get appointed as a U.S. attorney in Salt Lake City? Why would he do that? And it even got a lot of Democrats angry. They looked at Harry and said, come on, what's up with that, man? You're not playing with the party. Which ought to tell you that anytime the party says the party's best interests come in front of the country's or yours, well, that says all you need to know about parties. So here's the problem. because this was done, suddenly the entire federal prosecution office in Utah, everybody, all the federal prosecutors had to what's called recuse themselves, which means they said, hey, we've got a conflict of interest because we know this guy David Barlow or we know Mike Lee, and so we can't participate. Hands off, you're going to have to find somebody else who's objective. They weren't really concerned about objectivity. They were really concerned about the fact that this was a political hot potato and nobody wanted to touch it with a 10-foot pole. So the entire federal prosecutor's office said, you know, we're just going to recuse ourselves from this corruption case. And it's a conflict of interest because it involves a prosecutor and, you know, one of our state senators and some, you know, Harry Reid is involved. After they all recused themselves, state prosecutors got a court order transferring the federal evidence that had been gathered by the U.S. prosecutor's office into their possession. They said, look, if you guys aren't going to do it, send us the evidence, and I got a court order here that says you have to. Kudos to them for having the courage to do that, right? Because obviously the pressure's already on. Everybody else is walking around on eggshells. You know, if this was you, and you were being investigated for a dirty real estate deal or for accepting bribes to change your vote, which is what the Harry Reid's being accused of, these people would be all over you, swarming on you like killer bees. But when it comes to somebody in power, they're like, well, I don't know. You know, I mean, it really could be something altogether different. And they try to dissuade you. Then when that doesn't work, then they try to find a reason why they can't help you. Then when that doesn't work and the evidence is still clear, then they figure out why there's a conflict of interest and they say, see, I can't touch it, hands off. Is this what we expect in the justice system in our country? Arbitrary and capricious action for or against or avoidance of. I mean, you can tell a lie by omitting the truth just as well as you can tell a lie by misstating the truth. And that's what these people are doing. This is failure to do their job by omission because they have something to gain or they've got some benefit that comes into it for them, or they don't want to stick their weenie in the hand crank there and get it chopped off because they messed around with Harry or Mike Lee. You know what? The whole law enforcement community, and I'm not taking every cop there, but as a general collective group, y'all are more corrupt than the people you're going after, and you make me sick, especially anybody at the federal level. How shameful. How abusive. How corrupt and unethical and immoral. How do you go home and kiss your wife with that mouth? So, evidently, everybody in the state prosecutor's office, or in the federal prosecutor's office said, hey, we can't touch this deal with a 10-foot pole, so, you know, I'm busy right now. So this process left these FBI agents, who have jurisdiction across the country, in the unusual position of trying to help two local state prosecutors with a case that can't leave state court. Because the Department of Justice has said, well, we're not going to intervene. We're not going to intervene, and we're not going to draw a federal grand jury. It's a cover-up. And since they can't use the federal court system, they can only use this system against these people in the state of Utah. You know, the FBI is getting a lot of praise for sticking to it and trying to because even they say that this is unusual. Come on. When the FBI comes out and says, yeah, the actions of these people over in the Department of Justice, our sister agency, don't make sense to us either. So they're pursuing state charges against these Utah officials. Now, interestingly enough, former Utah Attorney General John Swallow, don't even go there, Former Utah Attorney General John Swallow is involved. And he's one of the investigated, not investigators. He's one of the investigatees. And the Justice Department refused to prosecute him. And he's a Republican. So, of course, he denies any wrongdoing. And the committee of the Utah legislature had a meeting 2 days ago on Wednesday, and they concluded that he may have violated as many as 8 state laws on his abuse of public office. Here's what they had to say. This is the special committee from the Utah legislature that held a meeting, looked at the evidence that was available, and said this. John Swallow, who was the Utah Attorney General, that's a very high position in a state government, quote, compromised the principles and integrity of the office to benefit himself and his political supporters. And he hung a veritable for sale sign on the office door that invited money interests to seek special treatment and favors. Hello? And the DOJ says, that's not quite enough. We really don't want to get involved. Now, of course, Swallow denies any wrongdoing. Don't even go there. A senior law enforcement official that's familiar with the discussions among the FBI, the Justice Department, and the state authorities said that after federal prosecutors declined to take on the Swallow case or to pursue the accusations about the 2 senators, a decision was made to pursue justice wherever it could be achieved, even if they had to only do that at the state level with the FBI assisting these 2 small-town guys. And I don't mean any disrespect to them. All the respect goes to these 2 guys that are standing there in the face of what must be a storm of pressure to back off. This law enforcement official, who will remain unnamed, have some courage, people. I come out here and throw this stuff out here all day long. I got nobody protecting me. Yeah, I got nothing to lose because you can't take my job away from me, but you can put me in jail or you can destroy me in other ways. Why don't you people have the courage of your convictions to stand up and put your name in print? I mean, it's the Washington Times, for crying out loud. The senior law enforcement official, who shall remain unnamed, says the sentiment was that it doesn't matter in the end where it occurs, in other words, the prosecution, as long as justice is served. So, people familiar with the probe said both FBI agents and local investigators have been frustrated for months by the Department of Justice's inaction on the initial accusations and the evidence against the 2 senators. And these concerns actually made it all the way to FBI headquarters. Now, wait until you hear this one. This is where it gets good. The special agent in charge of the Utah field office got summoned to D.C. suddenly. I mean, come on. He got called to Washington to meet with senior FBI officials. And the Bureau's Utah office has been instructed that the FBI agents who are working on the case may only assist in the state probe and cannot pursue federal criminal investigative leads. What? So wait a second. Now hold on a minute. The FBI says you agents can keep helping on the state level. But if you uncover any evidence that makes this look like a federal case, you're not allowed to act on it, and you cannot pursue that. People, haven't you had it yet? Look, this article goes on, and it lasts for pages. And we're going to run out of time. We got about 5 minutes left, 6 minutes left. Even the FBI says that it's rare, but not unprecedented, for their agents to assist in a state-only investigation. Everything smells wrong here, doesn't it? Everything about this case smells of corruption. The stench of corruption. Here's what I want you to see in your mind's eye. You've driven down the road and driven by a spot in a beautiful spring day with your windows down and nice and slow, you're driving along. And suddenly, the smell that comes into your car is just enough to gag you. And you realize that you've come upon a spot where there is an aura of putrid smell that is just pervasive, like it's thick in the air, like you could cut it with a knife. And it smacks you right in the forehead and says, dead body rotting. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the smell of death. It is the smell of corruption. It's the smell of the body as it corrupts and breaks down. That is the smell that you should feel and sense every time you think of your government, especially the Department of Justice, especially Harry Reid, especially these people, and perhaps Mike Lee. We don't know. He sure, some of this stuff they're talking about in this case, and you ought to read it, sure looks like it stinks. And as I've said many times, these people go into office with the best of intentions. But once they get there, all bets are off. And they almost invariably succumb to corruption. The stench, the aura, the overwhelming putrid odor of corruption. The FBI officials say it's rare but not unprecedented. We've let agents provide expertise and assist in ground investigations for states in the past, especially in complex cases where federal crimes weren't clear, says a senior FBI official, who again will only speak on anonymity. But in this case, DOJ risks creating the perception of a cover-up rather than allowing agents to use the normal tools and follow the evidence wherever it leads. Republican, Democrat, Senate, or not. Ladies and gentlemen, I am here to inform you that the entire system is corrupt, that everyone in it is a participant in it in some way, shape, or form, that none have a clear conscience, that none have a clear record, that in order to achieve that level of influence within this government, you have done evil and wrong. And the stench of corruption clings to you like cigarette smoke. Sometimes it's a little, you haven't rotted quite as bad as some of your friends and cohorts and co-workers and co-thieves and co-carpetbaggers. Your conspiratorial friends. And you are conspiring as a collective group against all of us. And we know it. We just haven't figured out a way to hold you accountable for it yet. But one day, that day will come, and woe is you. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States, and how they have abusively allowed no-knock warrants, even if there's just the presence of a gun in the house by a legal gun owner. How would they know that? Well, you never know, but they've got databases on everything now. We'll be right back. Now,